Millionaire hires a nanny, and the one who shows up is the woman he swore to forget. Before the story begins, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you love intense love stories full of emotion, twists, and heartwarming endings, subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing stories that truly touch the heart. The clock read 6:48 a.m. when Nathan Caldwell pushed through the glass doors of his office in San Diego, his shoulders tense and his expression even more so. His Italian shoes made a sharp sound on the marble floor. His tie was perfectly adjusted, his dark blonde hair neatly styled, and the tailored suit exuded control. But inside, he was on the edge. The nanny had quit that morning, leaving behind a scribbled note and her backpack on the stairs. She wasn't the first, not even the fifth, to abandon the job in less than a year. Oliver, his 3-year-old son, hadn't bonded with anyone. And Nathan didn't know how to bond with his own son either. As he entered his office, he threw the briefcase onto the oak desk and called out in a firm voice to his longtime personal assistant, "Douglas, hire another nanny. A decent one this time. Discreet, stable. None of those influencer types with online degrees. And don't bother me with details. Just get it done." Douglas, a bald, meticulous man in his 50s, gave a slight nod. "Of course, Mr. Caldwell. Today." Nathan nodded and sat behind the desk, rubbing his temples. His phone buzzed with notifications and meetings, but for a moment he sat still, staring at the photo frame showing Oliver as a baby in his mother's arms. The woman was no longer there, and part of him had died in that silent hospital 3 years ago. Across town, Claire Matthews was finishing tying her light brown hair into a messy bun while putting sunscreen on her son's face. "Noah, please. Honey, be good for Aunt Mayra, okay? Mommy will be back soon." The boy nodded silently, his green eyes fixed on her with a painful maturity for his 5 years. Claire bent down and hugged him tightly, breathing in the scent of baby soap and the warmth of his thin little arms around her neck. She got up in a hurry, grabbed her worn-out bag, and rushed out of the small 2-room apartment, descending the stairs with a racing heart. She had scored an interview for a nanny position in a high-end home. That was all the agency had told her. Claire had worked in wealthy homes before, but this job seemed different. The salary was nearly double the usual, with benefits. It was her chance to pay for Noah's school exams and catch up on 2 overdue electric bills. She just didn't know who she'd be working for. And she had no idea she was about to meet again the man who had broken her heart and abandoned her when she needed him the most. By late morning, Douglas was skimming through printed resumes, quickly narrowing down the most suitable profiles. He had no idea that among them was the name Claire Matthews, the name Nathan Caldwell had tried not to even think for years. "This one has good references," the assistant murmured. "Worked in 3 homes with young children. Single, discreet, no history of issues. Perfect." He picked up the phone and scheduled the interview for the next day. Claire answered on the 3rd ring, out of breath, just returning from the grocery store. "Ms. Matthews? This is from Whitestone Properties. Mr. Caldwell would like to interview you tomorrow at 9 a.m. for the nanny position." "Of course, I'll be there," she replied, trying to hide the nervousness in her voice, and just like that, with a simple phone call, fate was sealed. Claire would cross paths with Nathan again, and Nathan would face the woman he swore never to let near him again. Only this time, she wasn't alone. The next morning in San Diego dawned cloudy. Claire arrived 15 minutes before the scheduled time. She wore a simple white blouse, carefully pressed, and a long navy blue skirt. Her light brown hair was tied in a low, discreet bun, and though her face looked calm, the tension she felt in her stomach was hard to hide. When she rang the doorbell of the mansion at the top of La Yola, she was greeted by a uniformed woman. who simply said, "Mr. Caldwell will be right with you. You can wait in the living room." Claire walked down the wide hallway with cautious steps, taking in the subtle scent of lavender in the air and discreetly observing the paintings on the walls and the perfectly polished wooden floor. The place was too quiet, too sterile, almost like a magazine spread with no sign of real life. She stopped near the gray linen couch and clasped her hands in front of her, trying to control her nerves. Her heart was racing for no apparent reason. Or maybe it was a feeling, a warning. On the other side of the house, Nathan was walking down the corridor, eyes fixed on his phone screen. He wore a light blue shirt with rolled-up sleeves and no tie. His face set in an impatient expression. Just one more interview. 10 minutes tops, he muttered to himself as he entered the room, and the world stopped. Claire slowly turned at the sound of footsteps. And what she saw was exactly what she feared. The man who had shattered her heart 5 years earlier, the one she'd sworn never to face again. Nathan froze as well. His gray-green eyes widened, jaw clenched. The hand holding the phone dropped. Slowly, and his entire body seemed to stiffen. She was there. The woman he had loved intensely and lost bitterly. Claire tried to mask her shock, but her face went even paler. Her eyes met his for a brief moment before she looked down, as if trying to hide her pain somewhere. Nathan was the first to speak, his voice rough and tight. "Claire?" She gave a small nod, maintaining her composure. "Mr. Caldwell." Using. His last name was a wall, and it worked. He lifted his chin, trying to regain control. "You applied for this job knowing it was my house?" "No, I had no idea. The agency called me yesterday." The silence between them was thick, filled with unspoken memories. Words buried for years. Interrupted glances. Nathan took a step forward, about to end it. "This is a mistake. I'm going." Too, but before he could finish the sentence, the sound of small footsteps echoed down the hallway. Oliver came running in, wearing a moss green t-shirt, his blonde hair slightly messy. He had a little toy truck in his hands. When he saw Claire, he stopped and smiled wide. He walked right up to her without hesitation and hugged her leg like they were old friends. "You came back," the boy said, his voice sweet and his eyes sparkling. "She's nice, Daddy. I like her." Nathan froze. He looked at his son, then at Claire. The scene was as unexpected as it was unsettling. Oliver hardly ever approached strangers and never smiled that freely. Claire, surprised, crouched down. To the boy's level. "Hey, champ. It was nice seeing you in the garden yesterday." She looked up at Nathan again. For a moment, their eyes met once more, but now there was something different in his. A flicker of doubt, hesitation. He took a deep breath. "You start tomorrow?" Claire blinked, unsure she heard right. "Are you sure?" "Don't make me repeat it," he said, already turning away, as if trying to shield himself from his own weakness. "But yes. Oliver likes you, and that doesn't happen often." She nodded, still not fully processing what had just happened. She grabbed her bag, quietly thanked him, and walked out with steady steps. Though inside, she was falling apart. Once inside the old car she had parked 2 blocks away, Claire held the steering wheel for a few seconds before starting the engine. Her hands were shaking. She had no idea how long she'd be able to hide Noah from him, and Nathan had no idea that the child she was protecting was his. Not yet, but that encounter was just the beginning. A chasm had opened, and neither of them would escape unscathed. Claire spent the entire night awake. Nathan's gaze, cold, yet so familiar, haunted her even with her eyes closed. In the morning, she put on the modest uniform provided by the household, a white shirt, dark slacks, and low sneakers. She tied her brown hair more tightly and adjusted the makeshift name tag embroidered with Claire. Before leaving, she dropped Noah off with the neighbor, just as planned. The child was still asleep when she kissed his forehead. "Mommy will be back soon, okay?" "I promise." But promises no longer ease the guilt. When she arrived at the Caldwell mansion, she was greeted by Douglas, the assistant, who handed her a folder of guidelines with the efficiency of someone who dealt with machines, not people. The contract is for 3 months, renewable. No personal cell phones during working hours. There are cameras in all common areas. Mr. Caldwell is a private man. You're not allowed to ask about his personal life. Claire nodded, keeping her composure, even as her throat tightened. When she went up to Oliver's room, she found him sitting on the floor, playing with building blocks. He looked up at her and immediately smiled. "You really came," he said, like he just won a bet. "Of course I did, champ. I promised, remember?" She knelt beside him and dove into a world of colors and shapes, watching him with genuine interest. Oliver was class. Sweet. Shy, but smart. There was a quiet sadness in his eyes, something she knew too well. And the more time she spent with him, the more familiar that sadness became. A void that didn't come from a lack of toys, but from the absence of consistent affection. From upstairs, Nathan watched them through the crack in his office door. He held a cup of coffee in his hand, but his fingers didn't move. Claire laughed softly, while Oliver tried to mimic her, balancing a tower of red blocks. That scene was strangely hard to ignore. Later, as she was organizing Oliver's books, Nathan suddenly appeared in the doorway. Claire's heart jumped. "I need to make something clear." His voice was curt, controlled. "This is professional. I'm not interested in reopening anything from the past or talking about what happened." Claire nodded, eyes steady though. Her chest was burning. "I didn't come here to relive anything, Nathan. I'm just doing my job." He stared at her a second longer than he should have, then turned and walked away. But there was something in that look, not hatred, fear. Maybe, or the remnants of a feeling he was trying to bury. In the days that followed, Claire was flawless with her schedule. She prepared Oliver's meals, took him on walks through the garden, read to him before nap time. The boys started smiling more, eating better, sleeping without crying. Even Douglas remarked, "It's the first time in months little Oliver hasn't woken up in the middle of the night." Claire smiled silently, but the turmoil inside her only grew. With every compliment, every bond built, so came the fear. What would happen if someone found out about Noah? What if he wandered into that house by mistake? What if Oliver mentioned she talked to her other little boy on the phone? One afternoon, as she folded the sofa blankets, Claire heard footsteps in the hallway and Nathan's voice on the phone. "No, I'm not ready to let anyone else in. I can't trust someone I barely know with my son." She stood frozen, invisible among marble walls and silence. She wanted to run, wanted to give it all up. But then she thought of Noah, the formula that would run out in a week, the overdue power bill, the new school uniform he needed. "You can do this, Claire," she whispered to herself, eyes brimming. "Just a little longer. Just until you save enough." But what she didn't know was that secrets don't stay hidden forever. And sometimes, what you hide out of love can change everything once it's revealed. Claire didn't notice, in that moment, that Nathan had stopped at the corner of the hallway. And silently, he watched her wipe her tears with the back of her hand. He turned away without a word, but a doubt had been planted there. Subtle, uncomfortable, and harder to ignore with each passing day. Something didn't add up about her. And whatever it was, he was going to find out. In the days that followed, Claire turned her routine into a delicate game of strategy. She left before sunrise, walking 3 blocks to where a rideshare driver would pick her up, carefully avoiding any sign that Noah even existed. At night, she asked her neighbor to only bring him home once it was already dark, and never under any circumstances, allowed him near the Mansion Street. Nathan, with his clockwork life and endless meetings, barely noticed such details. But Claire never allowed herself to relax. Each day in that house was a test of endurance, of lies, of silent love. One afternoon, while tidying up toys scattered around the playroom, she heard Oliver's sweet voice. "Claire, do you have a kid?" She froze. The question struck. Like a shot in the dark, unexpected and straight to the heart. Oliver was sitting on the rug, surrounded by blocks and plushies, holding a plastic dinosaur and wearing the purest expression in the world. Claire forced a smile. "Why are you asking that, champ?" "Because you take care of me like a mom, and sometimes you talk to yourself like you miss someone." Her heart tightened painfully. She knelt beside him and ruffled his blonde hair gently. "I really like kids, and I really like you. That's all." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. But Claire turned her back and stayed crouched longer than she needed to, blinking hard to hold back the tears. That night, around 9, Nathan called. He wanted to know how his son's day had gone. Claire was holding Noah, trying to rock him to sleep. She rushed to the next room and answered on the last ring. "Mr. Caldwell? Did Oliver fall asleep early?" Nathan's voice was hoarse and tired. "Yes, he played a lot today. He's getting more confident." "Good. Tomorrow I'll try to leave work earlier. Maybe I can take him to the park after lunch." "Of course. I'll have everything ready," she said, glancing over at Noah, who now had his eyes closed. Exhausted after daycare and missing his mom, she ended the call and rested her forehead against the wall. Claire was walking through a minefield. One wrong step and everything would collapse. And what hurt the most wasn't the fear of losing her job. It was the fear of losing the right to keep being Noah's mother, sometimes from a distance. She watched Nathan with Oliver in the garden. On one of his rare free afternoons, he had come down to the lawn and tossed a ball to his son. Oliver ran with his arms wide open, laughing, stumbling on the grass. Nathan smiled, a real smile. Wide and warm, so unlike the man she remembered. She watched them together. And for a second, she imagined Noah there too, running beside his brother, laughing just as hard. But then the guilt returned like a cold wave. She was lying, hiding something that had a face, a name, and green eyes just like Nathan's. And even though she did it to protect her son, she couldn't escape the question that haunted her in silence. How long could she keep this up? On a Friday evening, under a light drizzle, Claire walked home with an old umbrella trembling in her hands. Noah walked beside her, his sneakers soaked, his hoodie's hood slipped down his back. "Mommy, who's my dad?" She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. The little boy looked up at her with sharp, curious eyes. He was still too young to understand everything, but old enough to feel the truth tugging at him. Claire knelt in front of him and cupped his face gently. "He's someone who would love you if he knew you existed, but for now, right now, all you need is me, and I'm here, always." Noah nodded slowly, not fully understanding but trusting. He always trusted her. Claire hugged him tight, her chest aching with so much love and so much fear. But what she didn't know was that fate was already opening a crack in the veil she tried so hard to keep intact. And soon, much more than she feared would be revealed. Saturday dawned slowly, shrouded in thin clouds and a light breeze that swayed the trees along San Diego's avenues. Nathan had canceled a last-minute meeting, something he rarely did. With Oliver in the back seat, he impulsively decided not to take him to the private club or upscale park. Instead, he turned left, drove across town, and headed to a public park he'd never been to before. It was simple, with old iron swings, a worn-out slide, and peeling wooden benches. But there were kids running, loud voices, bikes, and the scent. of buttery popcorn in the air. It felt real, organic, and somehow comforting. Nathan opened the car door for Oliver, who jumped out, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Can I run?" "Sure. Just stay where I can see you." Nathan leaned against the hood of the car, hands in the pockets of his jacket. The time was 10:18 a.m. He watched his son play with two other boys when, just a few meters away, a familiar laugh cut through the air. He turned his head and froze. Claire was sitting barefoot on the grass, wearing a light cotton blouse, her brown hair loose, partly tucked behind one ear. Beside her, a small boy rolled in the grass, laughing loudly, eyes squinting in the sun. The two of them seemed oblivious to the world, complete in that bubble of simplicity and affection. Nathan couldn't move. His heart slammed in his chest with brutal force. When the boy stood up and ran into Claire's arms, Nathan felt the air leave his lungs. The child looked about 5. Light skin, slightly wavy, dark blonde hair. But it was the eyes that undid him. Green, deep, alive. Exactly like his own. The boy turned his head. The squared jaw, the steady walk, the straight shoulders. It was like seeing a miniature version of himself. Oliver came running, calling out to Nathan, but the sound felt distant. The whole world slowed, like it was moving in slow motion. Claire noticed Nathan only when he was already approaching. Her smile vanished like a candle blown out. She stood up quickly, instinctively placing herself between the boy and the man. Nathan stopped just a few steps away. His eyes locked on the child, who was now holding the hem of his mother's shirt. "Who is he?" he asked, voice low but steady. Claire didn't answer right away. She tried to smile, but her face trembled. "He's my son." It hit Nathan like a punch. The scattered pieces from the past days started falling into place. Claire's absences, the tiredness in her eyes, the way she got emotional with Oliver, and now this boy, with the same eyes, the same mannerisms. "How old is he?" he asked, though he already knew. 5? Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. The math was exact. Too perfect to be coincidence. Claire knelt and whispered something into the boy's ear. He nodded, confused but sweet, and slowly walked toward the slide, where Oliver now waited for him, curious. Nathan and Claire stood only a few meters apart, silence pressing down between them. "You hid my son from me, Claire?" His voice cracked with disbelief. She met his eyes, and for the first time didn't try to look away. She was too tired to lie, too tired to deny what blood had already revealed. "Yes." Nathan took a breath, but it caught in his throat. He ran a hand through his hair and stepped back. "Why?" Claire fought the tears, her whole body trembling. "Because I was alone. Because you pushed me away. Because I thought if you knew, you might take from me the only thing I had left." Nathan didn't respond. Pride and regret warred inside him. But none of it mattered more than the truth he had just seen. He had a son. And he had no idea that boy even existed until now. Claire tried to keep her composure, but her eyes were shining. "His name is Noah," she said. "And he knows he has a dad. He just doesn't know who." Nathan swallowed hard, turning to look at the slide where the two boys were now laughing together. Oliver was gently pushing Noah, as if they'd been brothers all their lives. "This changes everything," he whispered. Claire nodded slowly, unsure whether this was the beginning of punishment or salvation. She only knew that from this moment on, nothing could be hidden anymore. Not the love, not the truth, not the pain that had always stood between them. That night, the mansion was drenched in a thick silence. The soft rain tapped against the wide windows of the master suite, but Nathan Caldwell heard none of it. Sitting in the armchair before the unlit fireplace, elbows on his knees and hands clasped under his chin, he stared into nothing. The image of the boy haunted him. The green eyes, the confident stride, the way he laughed going down the slide, all of it was a mirror, a living memory of himself as a child. He mentally retraced every date, every goodbye, every silence between him and Claire. He remembered. The last time he saw her before everything was lost, the harsh argument, the coldness he'd used to push her away without even listening. Back then, he thought he was protecting himself. Now he saw the truth. He'd been a coward. And now, time was collecting its debt. He had a son who had grown up not knowing he existed. A son he hadn't even had the chance to hold at birth. At 4:23 a.m., Nathan finally rose from the armchair. He walked to the bathroom mirror and stared at his reflection for a few seconds, and saw in his own eyes the same ones Noah carried. There was no denying it anymore. The next morning, Claire arrived earlier than usual. She needed to finish a report on Oliver's routines. She tried to act normal, but inside, her chest felt like a tightly stretched rope. She knew yesterday's encounter at the park had changed everything, and that Nathan wouldn't let it pass. When she entered the kitchen of the main house, she saw him. He was standing by the marble counter, coffee cup in hand, his expression tense. He wore dark jeans and a gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His face looked worn, but steady. Claire stopped, unsure whether to enter or step back. Nathan broke the silence. "The boy who was with you yesterday, is he your son?" His voice wasn't cold nor aggressive. It was restrained, like every word weighed too much to say. Claire hesitated for a second. Her heart was pounding so loudly it seemed to fill the room. She took a deep breath. Yes. Nathan didn't look away. He only nodded once, as if confirming what he already knew. The silence between them lingered longer than it should. "He's my son too, isn't he?" he asked at last, straight to the point. Claire felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. The words had been stuck in her throat for 5 years. But now, there was nowhere left to hide. Yes. The answer was soft but final. Like a verdict. Nathan leaned against the counter, his eyes drifting for a moment, as if needing protection from the very truth he demanded. He ran a hand over his face, then through his hair. "How old is he?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. He turned 5 in March. He nodded again, looking at her now with a mixture of pain and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Claire?" Her eyes burned. But she held back. "Because I was alone. You pushed me out of your life. I didn't know if I had the strength to face you or your family. I was afraid I'd lose him. Afraid his life would turn into another custody battle, another contract, another obligation." Nathan pressed his lips together. "That hurt. More than he expected. You didn't even give me the chance to choose. And did you give me any when you sent me away with a suitcase and no room to speak?" She shot back, her voice thick. "I had to protect myself and protect him." His gaze dropped for a moment. There was anger, yes, but also guilt. And maybe a regret he wasn't ready to say out loud. Outside, Oliver and Noah were running through the garden under the first rays of sunlight. Through the glass, Claire watched them laughing, as if they'd been brothers forever. As if blood had called. To blood before any adult had dared speak the truth. Nathan looked too. "They've already chosen each other," he murmured. Claire said nothing. It was true. And maybe the children were ready to forgive long before the parents found the courage to even try. Nathan looked at her again. His voice was lower now, nearly a whisper. "I don't know what to do with all of this, but I'm going to do something." Claire didn't respond, because she didn't know either. What would come next was unknown to both of them. But now, truth was on the table, whole, irreversible, and no lie had the strength to cover it ever again. The kitchen remained silent after the truth was spoken. But the air between Claire and Nathan was heavy, thick enough to suffocate. Outside, The children ran through the yard, oblivious to the storm of tension gathering like dark clouds ready to burst. Nathan took a step toward the window, moving away from the counter. His jaw was clenched tight, his gaze lost in the distance. Claire stayed where she was, shoulders tense, fingers interlaced in front of her, trying to hold herself together while everything inside her threatened to collapse. Nathan broke the silence, his voice restrained, yet aching with pain. 5 years. You took 5 years of my son's life away from me. Claire felt those words hit her chest like bricks. But she didn't look away. She couldn't run anymore. I was pregnant when you pushed me out of your life, Nathan. Her voice shook, but she held steady. I came to you that morning, remember? I just wanted to tell you what was happening, but you'd already decided I didn't belong. Nathan turned to her, his anger barely contained. So that made it fair to erase me? To deny me the right to watch him grow? Claire took 2 steps closer, her expression etched with pain. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it out of fear. I didn't know if I could survive facing you or your world. I was afraid you'd take Noah from me, that you'd see me as a problem to be solved with lawyers, custody papers, rules written by people who don't understand love. I would have fought for him, Nathan snapped, his eyes wet. You stole my chance to be a father, and you stole my peace. Claire's voice cracked through the calm, breaking through her restraint. You left me, Nathan, pregnant, scared, with nothing. I had to learn to be strong overnight because I had no one. Just him. She motioned her head toward the garden. And you know what's worse? I ask myself every day if I was doing the right thing, if I was protecting my son, or robbing him of something he never even got to know. Nathan ran his hands roughly through his hair, trying to keep the rage inside from exploding. You didn't trust me. Did you give me a reason to? Silence fell again. But this time, it was thick with everything they hadn't said. Wounds neither of them knew how to name, buried long before Noah had even come into the world. Claire took a deep breath. She knew this felt like the end of a line. Or maybe the beginning of an even greater rupture. She walked to the chair where her bag sat, and with trembling fingers, grabbed her keys. I can't stay here. Nathan turned sharply, eyes wide. You're running away again? She looked at him, firm and unwavering. No, but I will protect my son, and if that means stepping away, then yes, I'll go. Because what I won't do is let him grow up. In the middle of a war, Claire, I've already lost everything once. I won't do it again. She began walking toward the door. Nathan didn't move. He just watched her. The weight of guilt rooted him in place, making it impossible to speak, to act, to even grasp what, if anything, could still be saved. The standoff felt final. And as Claire walked down that hallway once more, just like 5 years ago. The difference now was that she wasn't carrying just an old wound. She carried a truth that could no longer be ignored. But sometimes, you have to lose everything again for love to finally have a real chance to be born. The days that followed were strangely silent in the Caldwell mansion. Oliver's toys remained untouched. The garden, once filled with laughter and running feet, now looked like a lifeless photograph. Still, colorless. At just 3 years old, Oliver couldn't name what hurt, but he felt Claire's absence in every corner of the house. On the second day, he refused breakfast. On the third, he didn't want to leave his room. And on the fourth, he cried quietly as he laid in bed. Daddy, where is she? He asked, his voice tight, eyes glassy. Nathan watched him, unsure how to respond. His son, who had never bonded with any previous nanny, now clung to Claire's name like a final flicker of light in the dark. She had to go, son, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. But I like her. She made me smile. The words tore something inside Nathan. Oliver wasn't being dramatic or difficult. He was mourning someone who had made him feel safe, someone who had seen him, someone who had truly loved him. That night, Nathan stood in the hallway outside his son's room for over an hour, listening to the muffled crying through the door. He thought about every decision, every word he'd said. Realized pride had given him a sense of being right, but had cost him everything that mattered. The next day, Nathan parked in front of a modest apartment complex on the east side of San Diego. No automated gates, no pristine gardens, just cracked sidewalks, kids on old bikes, and a concrete stairwell. Leading to the second floor. With Oliver in his arms, he knocked on door 204. Claire opened it, startled. She wore a worn-out cotton t-shirt and loose pants, her hair thrown up in a careless bun. Her face froze when she saw him, and then her eyes dropped to the child in his arms. "He asked to see you," Nathan said softly. Lowering Oliver to the ground. The boy ran straight to Claire, wrapping his arms tightly around her and burying his face in her belly. "I thought you'd never come back," Oliver whispered, voice choked. Claire knelt down and held him close, her eyes overflowing. "I never left you, sweetheart. I just needed a little time." From behind Claire, a small voice echoed in the hallway. "Mommy?" It was Noah. The 5-year-old appeared with a toy car in hand, his hair messy from play. When he saw Oliver, he paused. The two boys looked at each other in silence, and then they smiled. Without a word, Noah walked over and held out the toy. "Wanna play with me?" Oliver nodded. And just like that, as if they'd known each other forever, the two sat down on the living room rug and started playing. No questions, no hesitation. Like brothers who'd been separated by life, but reunited by instinct. Nathan remained at the door, a lump rising in his throat. Two little boys, one laughing loud, the other with eyes shining, drawn together without knowing why, belonging to each other with a naturalness that no adult could ever force. Claire stepped closer. They know each other, even if they don't understand how. Nathan swallowed hard. It's like their blood knows the way. She nodded, wordless. In the living room, the boys were already lost in a world of blocks and make-believe stories. Their laughter filled the tiny apartment, a space that had long been only about survival, now pulsing with something far greater. Nathan exhaled deeply, leaning against the doorframe. For the first time in years, his pride gave way to something else. An urgent need to do things differently, to make things right. "Claire, let me try to fix this." She looked at him carefully. There was still pain in her eyes, but also a fragile hope, like a window cracked open after a long storm. "It's not about me," she said, her eyes on the boys. "It's about them, Nathan." Look to and he understood if there was a way back. It started right there, in the truth the boys had shown, in the love the adults had almost lost. Sunday morning moved slowly, painted in soft gray light that slipped through the blinds of the small apartment. Claire was finishing the breakfast dishes when she heard the quiet giggles coming from the living room. Noah and Oliver were lying on the rug, each with a sock in one hand and a stuffed animal in the other, inventing voices and bringing to life a scene that existed only in their imaginations. It was beautiful. And at the same time, cruel. Claire rested her hands on the sink and closed her eyes for a moment. That bond, so natural, almost magical for the boys, was to her a painful reminder of everything that had been stolen by silence, pride, and fear. They played like brothers, as if they'd grown up side by side, as if lost time hadn't touched them. But she felt every second that had been lost. Then came a knock at the door. 3 slow knocks. Paused, not the rushed rhythm of a delivery, nor the friendly tap of the upstairs neighbor. Claire felt it in her stomach before she even moved. She walked to the door without hurry, hands still damp. When she turned the knob, the world stopped. Nathan stood there, no suit, none of his usual impenetrable stare. He wore a navy blue t-shirt, slightly wrinkled, and dark jeans. And somehow, he looked smaller, more human. His shoulders sagged, his arms loose at his sides, as if he were holding up the weight of his own regret. Claire said nothing, just watched him. His eyes were tired, worn, but honest in a way she didn't remember ever seeing. "Hi," he said softly. She didn't answer right away. She held the door with one hand, leaving it slightly ajar. She wasn't afraid of him, but she wasn't in a hurry either. Nathan took a deep breath, as if gathering courage to cross an invisible abyss. I didn't come here to argue, or to try and convince you of anything." Claire looked at him without hostility, but also without shelter. "I just needed to see you, and say what I couldn't yesterday." He ran a hand through his hair, the way he always did when trying to stay composed. "I made mistakes, Claire. And I don't just mean in the past. I failed you. When I didn't listen. When I let pride guide me. When I thought silence was strength. And now all I'm left with is regret. Nothing else." She narrowed her eyes, her chest both warming and aching at once. It was the first time she'd seen him without armor. "I thought I needed to protect myself from you, Nathan. And maybe you thought the same." "I did," he admitted. "But yesterday, seeing Noah, watching them together, laughing like they'd been brothers all along, it disarmed me. I kept staring at them and thinking about everything I lost. The time I can't get back, what I never had with my son, and what you had to carry alone." Claire felt tears rising, but blinked them back. "You left me alone. And when I came back, I had to pretend like nothing happened. I lived every day lying to protect a truth that only ever hurt in silence." Nathan lowered his head. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I know. And no matter how much I want to, I can't erase what I did. But I can choose what I do from now on." She crossed her arms and looked back into the apartment. The boys were now sharing a pack of cookies and singing a made-up song. It was rare and precious and fragile. "What do you want, Nathan?" she asked, turning her gaze back to him. He stepped closer, just one step, but kept a respectful distance. "I want to be present. I want to be Noah's father. For real. No contracts, no threats, no control. I just want to look at him and know that, even if it's late, I had the courage to do right." Claire swallowed hard. Her throat burned. "And what about me?" she asked, voice low. Nathan lifted his eyes, and for the first time, there was no defense, only vulnerability. "I want to be with you too. But only if it's what you want, not because you feel you have to." The tears escaped, but they weren't from pain. It felt like a weight finally falling away. Like, for the first time, she didn't have to defend herself just to survive. She turned slightly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Have you really changed, Nathan?" He nodded, not completely, but enough to know. "I don't want to lose what matters because of pride." Claire looked at him, really looked. For the first time, without anger. "Then prove it." She opened the door a little wider, letting the morning light spill into the hallway. Nathan smiled, small, hesitant, like someone who was still afraid to dream, but willing to try. "One day at a time?" he asked. Claire stepped aside. "Welcome to the first." From inside, the boys shouted in unison, "Mom!" The dinosaur knocked down the city. Nathan stepped in slowly, removing his shoes in the hall, like someone who understood finally that love isn't something you take. It's something you care for. And maybe, for the first time, he was ready to care. Time passed gently, as if the days had finally learned how to breathe. There were no grand announcements or cinematic twists. The transformation came slowly, in silent details that only those who have suffered quietly can truly notice. It was late afternoon in a modest, residential neighborhood of San Diego. The house had no high walls or automatic gates, but there was a garden with daisies planted by small hands, a bicycle resting on the porch, and sheer curtains dancing in the breeze. 2 boys ran barefoot through the yard, laughing, stumbling, shouting each other's names with instinctive familiarity. Noah wore a t-shirt with a rocket print. Oliver had shorts with pockets full of the little stones they had discovered together that morning. They played like brothers in both blood and soul, because, in many ways, they were. Claire watched from the kitchen window. Her brown hair was tied back simply, and there were faint dark circles under her eyes from long nights, but her face showed peace. Real peace, the kind that only comes after many internal battles have been won. On the table, a still unframed diploma rested beside a folded apron. Claire had finished nursing school 2 weeks earlier after years of sacrificing sleep, weekends, and every non-essential luxury. She now worked at a community health clinic, helping families like hers once was, fighting to survive with dignity. And every day, coming home to see her 2 sons, one from her body and one from fate, playing together, she knew it had all been worth it. Nathan arrived shortly after, carrying a brown paper bag with fresh vegetables and artisan bread. He parked the car himself, no chauffeur, no rush. In recent months, he had sold 3 of his company cars. He had also stepped down from the board of the holding he once ran with cold, distant hands. Today, he was a social impact investor. He chose projects that prioritized people, not just numbers. He entered through the kitchen and placed the bag on the counter with a quiet smile. "They're out back?" he asked. "Eating dirt and pretending to be astronauts," Claire replied. Drying her hands, chuckling softly. Nathan watched her for a moment, silently. He still marveled at the feeling of belonging, at her strength, at the way she turned pain into tenderness, exhaustion into presence. "Do you still doubt me?" he asked suddenly. Claire smiled with warmth. "Every day. But now, I'll let you show me who you are." And so far, you've done exactly that. They shared a calm look. No demands, no impossible promises. Just the quiet certainty that they were walking side by side now, not against each other. Later, while the boys painted the front gate with makeshift brushes and washable paint, Claire sat in a wooden circle with other local mothers. It was an informal group hosted by a nonprofit that supported single women. Sitting on a small bench, arms folded in her lap, her face touched by the golden glow of dusk, she listened to stories that echoed her own: abandonment, silence, fear, survival. Then it was her turn to speak. She took a deep breath, looked around, and said calmly, "We think hiding the truth protects us, that avoiding conflict avoids pain. But I learned that sometimes the truth is the only bridge that can save us. Not the safest bridge, not the easiest, but the most honest." Some women nodded quietly. Others wiped away tears. Claire continued, her voice thick with quiet emotion. "If I had followed my instinct to disappear forever, I would have lost more than the chance to see my son grow up with his father. I would have lost the right to see that love still exists, even when everything feels broken. Real love doesn't demand perfection. It demands courage. Courage to come back, to listen, to forgive, and to be forgiven." When she finished, she didn't wait for applause. She simply turned toward the gate, where Noah and Oliver were smearing blue paint on each other's faces, laughing like the sky itself was echoing with joy. That was it. The lesson wasn't just in the words. It was in their laughter, in presence, in the path they had chosen to walk together. Nathan came over. and Claire offered her hand without a word. They sat side by side on the porch step, watching the boys as if witnessing a miracle, not grand, but real. There, in that humble home with full hearts and steady feet, their story was being written, and this time, with truth. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and share which part moved you the most. If this story touched your heart in any way, like the video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Before you go, I've picked out another powerful story that's sure to move you even more. You need to watch it